So I never expected a Batman analog horror series to ever exist, but on the YouTube channel Siltrix there is one, and it's absolutely fantastic. Genuinely, it's one of the best pieces of analog horror media I've seen in a long while, and for good reason. As a brief overview, it's a story essentially based on the idea of what if Bruce Wayne didn't have Alfred by his side. And the deep pit of darkness this leads Bruce and Gotham at large into. Bruce still battles crime in Gotham City, but in doing so has gone completely astray from the values and morals that made the Bruce we all know into Batman. Now this is going to serve as an analysis and an in-depth review of the series, but if you haven't watched the series on Siltrix's channel, I highly recommend that you check it for yourself, because the sheer horror and value the series brings won't be properly represented in just this synopsis of mine, and I don't want to take away the impact that the series has, so definitely check it out. That being said, let's get into the breakdown. The Bat Incident, 1959. We first pick up with a VHS tape which is dated for the day of April 26, 1959, which is coincidentally 20 years after the death of Thomas and Martha Wayne. We learn that Arkham Asylum was recently placed under lockdown after a mysterious figure was spotted near the roof of it, and we then see the recovered footage of a lockdown announcement by the asylum to follow all lockdown procedures and informing us that the GCPD and Arkham Security have been called to take care of the situation. And the procedures I just mentioned are surprisingly listed for patients Waylon Jones, Kirk Langstrom, and Pamela Lillian Isley, as well as the patient Zero John Doe, who turns out to be the Joker, with the announcement finally informing us to run if we encounter a man dressed as a bat. We cut back to the tape, and the individual is described by a witness as a man in a bat suit hiding behind a dark corner, which is followed by an artist's rendition which is disturbing, to say the least. The witness reported that the man was walking towards the special containment area, and while doing so he was muttering "justice" and looked malnourished, like he was isolated from the earth for a long period of time. Keep this in mind because it's going to make a lot more sense later on. Afterwards, we're told screaming could be heard from the cells, and inside, the man in the bat suit vanished into thin air without even a trace. But he left behind something that haunts Gotham to this day. And out of the 4 patients, only patient 0 survived, while the rest were all killed and horrifically marked with a bat symbol, having even their bodies shaped in the form of bat. But that's not the only unsettling thing, because of the 3 that died, all had abnormal bodies, and these abnormalities were completely removed once they were found. Croc and Ivy had their skin removed, along with eyes and teeth, with Ivy even being found with her red hair gone. Man-Bat's arms were amputated and had an object in the shape of a bat lodged into his chest. Patient 0 was left untouched, however, but in a somehow worse mental state than before. And just as a side note, if someone would go as far to make the Joker become more insane, they must have done some really traumatizing stuff. Anyways, we found out that the patient 0, ever since the incident, can't stop talking about the man in the batsuit, and that he's ready for his return, upon which we see this horrifyingly well done sketch of a Batman straight from hell, concluding episode 1 as it glitches out. And for the first tape, this builds up tension so well. The slight pacing of every bit of information with certain clues and teases throughout the tape, like the death anniversary of the Waynes and the red-blooded cowl of the Batsuit, is perfect. Cause this, complemented with the cold static of the tape in the background, you actually feel pretty uneasy. It's worrying to think about Batman becoming a symbol of pure fear and not the justice he brings along with it, just taking down his enemies in extremely dark fashion, completely opposed to the original rules of the Batman we know. And the way Siltrix weaponizes this horror you feel from the loss of familiarity from his character is extremely effective, because they develop the man in the batsuit as a growing threat instead of being just some instant murder machine and becoming another cheap version of the what if X character was evil concept. The atmosphere of the whole tape starts to darken with the bat being mentioned, and the way the tape immediately makes you feel invested rather than shocked with how the patient's deaths are described is what I feel makes a mark of good storytelling. And I also have to mention how I love that they have taken the actual lore from the Batman and DC mythos and actually implemented it beyond just the surface level, which you'll see later on as well, from already a few villains of Batman's rogues gallery being present, and that too being given reason. Their deaths aren't done just to show that this version of Batman is evil. No. Rather, they're done to show that this version of Batman is nothing like the one we know, being a complete polar opposite to his rule of no killing, to give us a sense of just how much he's out for vengeance upon criminals, which only further elevates and gives genuine truth to the assumed stakes of the story. But now, let's move on to the next tape in the series, Jim Gordon Audio Log Live.mp4 Corrupted, 1960. The log opens by informing us that it's been a year since the Bat incident. There's been more sightings of the Batman, as people are calling him now, along with many other heroes now coming about, like the Blue Boy Scout in Metropolis and the Fast Guy in Central City. Strange, really strange. The tape follows by saying how weird it was that the Bat incident happened exactly 20 years after and on the same day that the Waynes were murdered. That poor Bruce, before he went missing, he was showing strange behavior. We learn that according to the CEO of Cord Industries, Ted Cord, who was a friend of Bruce never got over his parents' death, staying malnourished and wanting to restore order to Gotham in insane ways. We're told that Cord and his building were soon burned down with everyone inside after telling this to Jim. From here, we see two pictures of Bruce, one young and with spirit, and the last one recorded of him showing his tired self. Many people think Bruce is dead, or maybe somewhere traveling, but there are some, including Jim, who think he never even left, and that he is the Batman. From which we cut to extreme glitching to where a message appears. Citizens of Gotham, vengeance is coming, showing to us why this log became corrupted as we end on distorted images of Bruce, now the Bat. Now this is on the shorter end of the episodes, but there's still a lot great with it. For one, continuing to expand this horrorverse with the additions of Blue Beetle, Supes, and Flash is definitely an interesting take and something that Siltrix themselves are taking on as well, which is really neat to see, especially in terms of their dedication to this universe. The slow confirmation of telling us the known news that Bruce is this hopeless version of Batman still hits here, especially with that jump cut message, because it was subtly hinted at so well in episode 1, and the payoff to make him now a threat by the end, but also leaving you wondering why he became as such, is really good direction that makes you want to watch what happens next, and find out what made Bruce lose himself to his parents' death, rather than grow from it as we know. The effect of the text and images simultaneously is also well executed, because unlike many solo creator analog horror, which are very text heavy and feel like you're reading a book with a pan boiling oil in the background in the form of overused static and arbitrary noises, Siltrix here has done a fantastic job of making the balance between the text and images feel supported and have value, because either without the other just wouldn't have the same level of impact, and the fact that this is realized and properly done keeps the pacing all that better. From here, we move on to the next video in the series, GCPD Instructional Presentation 1, 1962. The tape opens by greeting us to the instructional presentation by the GCPD on what to do if a loved one is missing. The tape then begins by telling us what to do to ensure your loved ones don't go missing, by first keeping an eye on them at all times, locking the doors and windows so they don't go out, and making sure that no one makes contact with the Bat because under any and all circumstances, it will harm you. After which the screen glitches on an instructional image of the Bat and ends by cutting to black. Now going to the description, it hints at the kind of vengeance that comes with this Batman. It seems he still wants to fight the evil of Gotham as implied with his conversation with Cord, but he has no morals about it. It could be that the Bat is just trying to kill criminals and take them out permanently, and as such no one is allowed out, or that maybe the Bat actually wants to end the lives of good and evil in Gotham. But in my honest opinion, the reason he may be doing so is because although his mission seems to be to eradicate the crime of Gotham, he may, in his own sick way, also be trying to prevent any more from ever arising in the future as well, by possibly trying to end the lives of these good people as a means of freeing them from the suffering that Gotham brings through its criminals, in turn preventing other innocent people from becoming criminals, albeit through drastic measures. Not to mention that he could also be doing so to build some kind of a sick and twisted version of the Batfamily, and in an attempt to gain his Robins who could help him on his mission. There was also something I wanted to mention about Step 2, because just listen to this.
Step 2. Lock all your doors and windows so they don't go out.
How Step 2 informs parents to lock the doors and windows, and then taking a slight pause and stating so they don't go out, is excellent, because even though it may be unintentional due to the text-to-speech voice's output, it gives the implication that in reality, the reason you should hunker down with your family is so that the Batman doesn't come for you and your family, rather than your child getting out. This kind of hinted horror and risk development adds so much more suspense to this story and makes the world building that much more functional. But now, we move on to the next tape titled The Truth. We open with the note of this message saying that they shouldn't be talking about this, but are trying to do so without getting caught, and they confirm that the Batman is indeed Bruce Wayne, or at least once was. The Bruce side of him that was present is gone, and only the Bat now remains. We're told his body is getting skinnier, yet he still retains his strength and agility, which could most likely be attributed to a drug that Bruce is using. The most recent incident involved a little boy walking home and noticing the Bat in an alley, and was able to take this ominous photo of him. And now thankfully crime rates have been dropping, along with Arkham becoming practically empty, though again this drop in crime could also just be due to people and criminals leaving the city out of fear. Anyhow, we're then presented with proof that Batman is Bruce. For one, since the time of the first Bat incident, Bruce has not been seen. Secondly, there's also a leaked audio recording which has been found, but before showing us the recording, they tell us to not show this audio to the law so it doesn't find out. And it, of course, seems to be hinting at the Bat, and that he may be keeping a close eye on the police. As it begins playing, we first get a brief look at some flashing text appearing on screen which says, "You shouldn't have found this." Now for the audio, this is what's been roughly concluded that it said. "My name is Bruce Wayne, my father is Thomas Wayne, my mother is Martha Wayne. They were both murdered when I was a child. I'm here to confess. It looks like my plan has worked. People of Gotham will submit. I'm Gotham's jury, judge, and executioner. I am the night. I am fear. Now from this tape, we can clearly see that Bruce is working in his eyes alongside the law and for the betterment of Gotham, still trying to be a vigilante, though he won't mind getting his enemies out of his way, good or bad, if they're hindering his battle for his corrupted sense of justice. Almost like Kira from Death Note in a way. But now, that's the end of this tape. Moving on to the next one. Missing People's Broadcast, 1962. We open the tape with the iconic murder in the shower scene from Psycho, before it gets cut off by an emergency broadcast from the GCPD. The broadcast details that many people have recently gone missing in Old Gotham, Miyagani Island, and Bleak Island, which further goes to emphasize the kind of hold Batman has on the city as of now. It informs us that if people are receiving this message, then they are in one of these three areas, and as such they must lock all doors and windows and not let anyone leave their homes under any circumstance. We then get shown some photos of these missing individuals, which are Richard Grayson, Barbara Gordon, Stephanie Brown, and Jason Todd, until Jason's face suddenly starts to glitch and distort with a bat symbol appearing over his face, from which it cuts to black and text informing us that we are too late. After this, we get shown a photo of a cave with exactly 4 coffins, until cutting to more text informing us they are family now. Keep this in mind because this is going to be important later, with the tape finally then ending with sirens and the sight of what seems to be a burning building. Okay, so we have a good bit to break down here. For one, if you're unaware of the names of these missing people, they are members of the early Batfamily, namely Richard Grayson being the first Robin and later Nightwing, Barbara Gordon being Batgirl, Stephanie Brown being another Robin, and Jason being the second Robin who eventually became the vigilante known as Red Hood. Though instead of being the caring Bruce that we all know who took these kids in and raised them with care and gave them a better life than they would have had otherwise by making them into noble crime fighters, here, they're all children who have been taken by this feral, murderous version of Bruce who's most likely trying to mold them into becoming his minions for a sick plan. There's also possibly some kind of solace he might be gaining from this, to cope with the loss of his parents since he never really had anyone growing up, and as such he's stealing from other families to make his own. Him saying that they're family now could imply that he's done something to them, which has corrupted them just like him. And the burning building may be the Wayne Manor or some other kind of area with significance. Though we'll have to look at the next video for some answers to that as we move on to names, 1962. This tape opens with a burning picture of the Wayne Manor, which confirms our suspicions from the last video, though the manor had apparently randomly caught on fire with nearly everything inside the house becoming destroyed, besides some pictures of the Wayne family and a clock. And it turns out that behind that clock was a hidden door that led to a cave, which turned out to be massive. We then learn that the things the person who made this tape is going to show us were never meant to be shown, and he's only informing us of it because he snuck into the building himself after the police left. And we learn the reason these things were never meant to be seen was because what they found down there was disturbing and distressing, and intended to be kept away from the public eye to avoid panic. The first of these discoveries we see is of the costume of the bat within the eerie cave. Other things that this person found were a modified car, which is most likely the Batmobile, and several random files on the history and inner workings of Gotham. Interestingly though, there was also another list of files which all had a bunch of names, but most importantly also had the name of this person who is recording his discoveries in the cave. The list is then shown to us with a ton of familiar names if you've read the comics, and after which the creator of the tape wonders why his name was on that list, and why the names of those other people were there as well. Though, before he could think any longer, he saw them. Several people in the cave with him who had their faces obscured, and upon seeing this, like any rational human being would, he booked it right out of there. But not before seeing him again, the Bat, standing there grimly with a red glow coming off of him. But Batman didn't chase the narrator, and rather just stared at him while he drove off on his bike. The narrator then tells us that the police are trying to cover all of this up, probably because the chief's daughter is one of the people who's gone missing due to the Bat. The narrator also tells us that the police are trying to tell everyone the Bat is dead, but that's only led to a resurgence of crime in Gotham due to criminals now thinking that they have nothing to fear with the Bat being gone. The narrator informs us of his plan to leave Gotham as soon as possible, fearing that otherwise he may just become another one of the Bat's victims like those he just found in the cave. Though the likelihood that he escaped is rare, considering a missing poster then appears of a one Timothy Drake, who is commonly the third Robin, but in this universe as the one who created this tape. The tape then concludes by telling us to never go in the cave under Wayne Manor, with red text coming under his words informing us, "Otherwise I'll do to you what I did to the missing." Okay, so there is much more stuff that has now been established, so let's break it all down. Bruce seemingly has started a crusade on crime as the Batman, and is fueled by vengeance due to the fact that his parents' death broke him. And the fact that Alfred is so far nowhere in the picture could mean that he died early in Bruce's childhood, and that loss of Alfred could have been the thing that pushed Bruce over the edge. Bruce is still fighting crime in Gotham, but as a broken man, and not as a means of simply protecting the innocent, but rather focusing on punishing the guilty. He's also taking people, but more specifically children, from their homes and off the streets to take them into his family of sorts, which he's always wanted, and molding them into people who can help him in his mission to rid crime from Gotham. And here is how I feel this mission of his has basically gone so far. First, Bruce, considering how crazed he was of reforming Gotham with Ted Kord, decided to take matters into his own hands and become a vigilante. Since he had a pretty dark mental state by this point, he probably didn't train to become Batman like our Bruce did, since this Bruce has never really seemed to take care of his health. And as such, he began to experiment on himself using the drug Jim mentioned, which probably enabled him to retain his strength and power even whilst being malnourished, and allowed him to become the Bat without any prior training. And my theory is that this drug could be Venom, the thing that makes Bane become Hulk-like, or possibly even some sort of other steroidal compound, since the series does pull a lot of concepts from the DC Universe. Regardless, after he became the Bat, the first Bat incident happened, and since then Bruce has gone missing, but he's most likely doing so to fully assume the role of Batman. As the Bat, he's begun to kill anyone who he deems as wicked, and possibly even the innocent to quote-unquote free them from the suffering of Gotham. The kids and others he's kidnapping are most likely also being tested and experimented on with the drug Bruce has used in an attempt to make them just like him, and he's probably working on indoctrinating them into his family if the drug can't do so itself. And now, Tim seems to be the most recent victim of the Bat's kidnappings, and that's about a rough summary for what's happened so far. But now, let's move on to the next video in the series titled Prisoner, 1962. We open up with text of Jason Todd introducing himself as the protagonist of this tape and one of the missing. Jason explains that he'll tell us what happened to the others and what the Bat's motivations are, which is accompanied by a dimly lit photo of him. Jason then explains his backstory. He was a kid from a bad part of Gotham with a father who was a crook who abandoned him and his mom. As a result, Jason's mother was abusing drugs, leading him to have to provide for the family, and he did so by stealing car parts and selling them, though his mother unfortunately died soon after, rendering him completely alone. As a result, Jason had to keep selling car parts to survive, and one night when he was out, he saw a strange car in particular that seemed really expensive, so Jason began to unscrew its wheels, hoping that it would turn a good profit. But right when he was doing so, he got knocked out by someone out of nowhere. He says that his memory has been foggy ever since, but he knows that he was tied up and gagged in the car. Eventually, he woke up in a cell in a cave, and there were other people there as well, in cells just like his. Jason then tells us that he made friends with one of the guys there, Richard, or Dick as he's otherwise known, who was a performer. But unfortunately, Dick was the first to turn. Jason then explains that the Bat used a kind of drug, which was made out of a modified version of Venom, to make the kidnapped become like him, which confirms our suspicions from the last video. Jason then says that for some reason, he was the last to go through the procedure, even though he was the fourth person taken. The woman before him who went through the process was Catwoman, who Bruce had a thing for, with a picture of her then being shown on screen, which looks quite similar to the Adam West Batman TV show style, which in real life came out around the time period these videos take place. Jason then follows by saying that she tried to fight back, but was taken somewhere unknown, after which came Jason's turn because one of the prisoners escaped. He was then tied up to a chair and the Bat began the process on him, but not before explaining a little bit about himself to Jason. The Bat told him of a butler named Alfred, and how he was like a father to him after his parents passed away, though Alfred also died soon after Bruce's parents' funeral due to a stroke. Bruce then asked Jason about his family, assuming that he still had one, though upon Jason revealing that he was all on his own, the Bat froze up as he realized that they had both lost the closest people to them, their parents. Bruce then started asking Jason to join him in ridding Gotham of crime and corruption, upon which Jason, just like any reasonable human being in this situation, says to Bruce that he was crazy and needed serious help. And Bruce, hearing this, became angered and released a dose of fear toxin in the air, which for some context is the gas that Scarecrow, traditionally one of Batman's villains, uses to make his enemies afraid of him. And this time, Jason's restraints were removed, and seeing the opportunity he now had, he ran as fast as he could in hopes of escaping. But when he ran, he felt as though he was being followed, until a rope of sorts, which was most likely the Bat grapple, lashed onto him and began pulling him back, though Jason luckily broke free using a batarang that was near him to cut the rope. Afterwards, Jason kept running and the Bat kept chase, although the Bat looked different this time around. And while Jason was exiting the cave, the Bat immediately stopped. And when Jason got out of the house, he heard an intense rumbling, which was followed by the Wayne Manor blowing up, with Jason barely surviving. The cops then questioned Jason and asked him to draw a sketch of the Bat, upon which Jason just somehow became Kyle Rayner for a second, as we then see the single most coldest piece of art ever made, ending the tape with the words "I see you" appearing on screen. Now this was easily my favorite episode so far, but let's also analyze why so and where it could lead from here. So first off, when Jason's backstory is introduced, it stays very faithful to his original origin from the comics. But here, instead of Bruce taking in Jason after he saw Jason unscrewing the wheels from the Batmobile and training him to be the second Robin, he abducted him in an attempt to make him a vessel for his mission, which already greatly shows how depraved this Bruce has become, even beyond what we've already seen. Now as far as we know, Dick and Catwoman so far have been the only ones who have turned due to the Venom. as Jason himself says that he was the last to go through the process after both of them since the third convict escaped. And on the topic of the venom and fear toxin, it could be that Bruce killed Bane and Scarecrow with them somehow or acquired it from them, which only further develops his threat level in the story. Though what's really surprising is his restraint with the threat he brings. For one, his love for Catwoman being present and the way he takes her to another room, which I personally think that he did because he maybe didn't go through with giving her the venom due to his guilt and still kept her locked up, shows that he still has some of Bruce still left in his core. Along with this, when Jason tells Bruce that his parents have also died, he sympathizes with Jason just like our Bruce and tries asking him to become his Robin, rather than with force of the fear toxin at first. To some extent, he shows that he still has some level of humanity and that some innate pieces of good within him still aren't gone. Besides this, we know now for sure that Alfred is dead, and most definitely was the reason Bruce became the dark vigilante he is now, because without Alfred by his side, there was no one to keep Bruce in his sadness in check and to support him when he was in his darkest places, which led him to turn to the vices of his mind, making him believe that the only way Gotham can truly be safe is if crime is fully exterminated rather than with a moral sense of justice, as our Bruce learned with Alfred raising him. Along with that, since we saw in Tim's tape at the start that the manor caught on fire, this could mean this tape takes place right before that, and the Bat did so to cover his tracks and to still continue taking the people on his list. Most importantly though, we have to check the description, because it seems that Jason is maybe planning to become the Red Hood and take down Bruce on his own accord after what happened to him. So far, I have to say, the comic continuity of this series is fantastic. The exposition of each plot point being explained in later chapters with the impact and suspense being felt early on, like with the Wayne Manor and White became destroyed, built such a worrying atmosphere, and nothing in the series is present just for the sake of shock or impact, but actually has value to the overarching plot. So much so to the point that you can already feel that the story has been carefully crafted and well thought out, which just makes it all the more better as a narrative. So now, let's move on to the next video in the series, Owl Hijack, 1963. So this tape is on the shorter side, but we open up on a 60s Coca-Cola commercial playing on a TV. This goes on for about a minute until eventually being interrupted by a message from the Court of Owls, an organization of crime lords from the comics that run Gotham from the shadows. We're shown some nightmarish visuals of the group before a message appears declaring, "Send the Talon for the Bat's head," and the tape ends. So now, the Joker, Jason, the GCPD, possibly Barbara Gordon or Stephanie Brown, and the Court of Owls, who are now going anti-hero by seemingly still maintaining their criminal overrule of Gotham, are all working together to bring down the citywide threat of the Bat and fighting back. But now, it's time to move on to the latest video in the series up until now, which is Crime, 1963. We open with text reading, "Since the Bat died, crime has risen again. There are many different criminals, but there's one who's the worst of them all. This criminal has killed over 30 people in the last few years, that criminal being the Joker, who was left alive by the Bat." We see a freakish bubblegum smile of the Joker, with more text stating that he on his own has made the murder toll rise significantly. These murders he commits are usually against other crime families like the Falcones and Bertinellis, along with the homeless. And he may have thrown a chemical at the mayor's face, with red text then saying he's always watching. We're told the Joker had many names he's gone by during his crimes, one of them being the death of the Waynes, which means Joker has been around long before Bruce became the Bat. We're told it's obvious when it's a crime of the Joker because of the smiles found on the corpses, along with leaving something in relation to the Bat, such as these grim drawings of the shadowy figure of him. Bruce is seemingly keeping the Joker alive in order to torment him for the rest of his time after what he did to his parents. We're told the police won't do anything due to most of them being corrupt themselves, and as such protests, looting, and other crimes continue to grow. Not to mention that most of the city seems to be rejecting Mayor Harvey Dent, and after he had acid thrown on his face, which will probably lead him to becoming Two-Face eventually, that rejection only grew. All this mayhem just because the Bat was declared dead, with people even making fun of it with the fake owl hijack that happened, as they're just an urban legend, as the tape creator states. But I'll be honest, I don't think the Court of Owls message was fake, nor that they're just a legend in this universe. It seems that the city has fallen into such disorder that even the police don't believe anyone could fight for good, let alone believe that the Bat is alive. But the court seems to know the truth about Bruce still being alive, and my theory is that they are indeed fighting against the Bat, and that was how they sent out the message to do so to the Talon. But continuing on, we're told that the kids have stopped going missing, though more and more lunatics keep coming about, with a little nod to Riddler appearing on screen. The streets are a terrible place to live, but extremely cheap at that. After the daughter of the police captain who is creating this tape died, he stepped down and moved out of there. He tells Gotham citizens that they should pray to God, as only he can save them now. The Bat isn't dead, and rather watching us right now. Though red text then appears implying the Bat isn't, and that possibly it's the Joker. after which we hear knocking, followed by the Joker's maniacal laugh with his disfigured face appearing on screen, which could mean that the Joker has now taken Gordon and possibly amping up to not be someone who fights the Bat in this universe as we expected, but rather someone who will only plunge the city into deeper chaos. And that concludes the final tape in this series up until this point. Alright, so far I am really enjoying this series. The suspense, pacing, character development, and everything is extremely on point. Even the art and pictures shown on screen give off such a dreadful feeling and make you realize how much of a ruin this version of Gotham is. Alongside that though, I also have a theory regarding the development of this universe, that being that Bruce's power may not just be from the venom he's using, but possibly something otherworldly as well. Because if you remember, we were told that Bruce looked unnaturally malnourished, as if he were isolated from the earth for a long period of time, and along with that in Bruce's cave, we saw 4 coffins for the 4 people he kidnapped, telling us that they're family now. Now what I think this means, and hear me out because this will sound a little crazy, is that Bruce is a vampire, which he most likely became due to some sort of DC entity offering him a deal for the power of a lifetime, enabling him to become a vigilante, which wouldn't be too far-fetched to assume since the series already pulls from a ton of the extended DC Universe lore. This could explain his power and physique beyond just what Venom can give, and with those coffins, there may be some ritual that Bruce is pulling off through which he can store and eternalize the bodies of all the missing and make them his by force. But then again, that could be just an insane theory, though it could also serve as food for thought, so that's definitely something. Regardless, the city and its world building of this series has been so intricately created, with characters not just being present as shock or cannon fodder, but each having an arc and connection with other tapes as a culminating event of trying to take down the Bat, while also trying to ensure that criminals of Gotham don't make the city fall into an even greater pit of disarray. Though with such a climactic event soon coming with new groups and vigilantes like the Court and Jason getting involved, there's so many ways the story could go from here, and I for one can't wait to see what happens next, because this is easily the most unique analog horror series I've seen since Greylock, and while there are some critiques with the text being far too quick early on and having to pause a ton to read them as it does break the in-depth engagement the series is trying to pull off, along with some significant plot holes being present, which to be fair aren't really plot holes, as for example with why Batman left Joker alive in tape 1, that was explained in the most latest tape, so it's more so just a build-up of suspense and greater intrigue and reveals down the line. Though the premise of flipping Batman's morals but giving him the same path of vengeance is still really interesting, and honestly in my opinion what the Batman Who Laughs should have been, instead of the pasty edgelord cue ball looking dude that we got in the comics. Anyhow, Siltrix, if you're watching this, keep it up man, because this series has insanely huge potential, and if all goes well, it would be cool to see where this extended DC horror universe goes. So yeah, definitely go check out the original series over on Siltrix's channel, and leave me your thoughts below on what you guys thought of the series, and what you thought was great or maybe could have been improved. Nevertheless, I'll see you guys in the next one.